Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, our students. Today, inshallah, we're gonna to complete our course Critical Thinking. And in the previous lecture, we dealt with the different critical thinking skills. And today, in lecture 6, and this is chapter 5, we will deal with the critical thinking and the effective or the critical reading. The main topics of this chapter: the importance of critical reading, the reading skills, the definition of reading or critical reading, the steps for critical reading, the skills for critical reading, what are the ways to develop the critical reading, and the definition of critical analysis and what are the elements of the critical analysis, also the elements of critical thinking. By the end of this chapter, you will be able to recognize the importance of critical thinking, to apply critical thinking skills, to define critical reading, to distinguish between the different topics of critical reading, and to use steps of critical reading, and to define critical analysis and its elements, and to identify the elements of critical thinking. First of all, let's tackle these basic concepts. The first thing is concerning reading, but first of all, we would like to define what's meant by reading as a process. And this definition was adopted by Hussein 2007. In this definition, reading is defined as the sensory perception of words and phrases to understand the meaning. So this is some kind of perception, and this sensory perception of words and phrases to be able to understand the meaning behind them. The reader is a passive recipient. This is the regular or the traditional reading. An active intellectual construction process in which the reader uses high-level thinking skills to process knowledge. Take care here. So there is two parts of reading. The first part is passive, just to perceive the words and the phrases, to understand the meaning. And the active part here is to think using the high level thinking skills to be able to process knowledge. So any reading process includes two parts: passive part and active part. Then the critical reading is a form of reading that makes use of high level thinking skills. So the critical reading here focuses on or concentrates on the active part of the reading process in general, which is the high level thinking skills. So the critical reading develops the reader's skills to interact consciously with the readable text in order to adopt critical attitudes and viewpoints. Take care here. So in case of the critical reading, we are focusing on the active part of the reading process, which deals with the high level thinking skills. And through this process, the critical thinking, the reader himself can interact consciously with the text in order to adopt some attitudes and viewpoints. Also, the critical thinking enables us to identify similarities and differences in the text, and to be able to identify the relationship between causes and results, even to infer some assumptions made by the writer himself or herself. The critical reading also does not stop at the limit of the literal meanings, which are called denotations of the text, but rather goes deeper to understand symbolic connotations. So in this context, we have two different concepts. The first is called denotation of the word of the phrase, and the other one is called connotation. But what's meant by denotation and connotations? And can we have some examples for denotation and connotations? Let's do that right now. Denotations and connotations. Denotation, this from the verb denote, denote, and denotation is the precise literal definition of a word or a phrase that might be found in a dictionary, and it is called the primary meaning. While connotation, this is from the verb connote, is the suggested or implied meaning of a word or phrase, that's to say, the emotionally or culturally associated meaning. So it is called the secondary meaning. And connotation may be positive, negative, or neutral. What's meant here? We mean that any word, single word, or even phrase, group of words, in general, has something called denotation, which is the primary meaning, which is the meaning, the primary meaning, or the literal definition or the literal meaning of the word, which can be found in the dictionary, and another meaning called connotation. And the connotation is the implied meaning or the suggested meaning or the associated meaning of the word or the phrase. And this varies according to the background, the social background, the cultural background, among others. And connotation, as stated before, may be positive, negative, or neutral. I mean the connotation, the secondary meaning of the word may be positive, negative, or neutral. Let's here take some examples. Words some red, blue, winter, dog, cow, aroma, stench, etc. What are the denotations and the connotations of these words? For example, when we say red, the primary meaning is the red color. But what about the secondary meaning or the associated meaning or the implied meaning? You know, we usually use the red color to indicate danger. So when you see the red color, you may associate the meaning or the concept of danger. So the denotation of the word red is the red color, as you know, and this can be found in the dictionary. And the connotation, I mean the secondary meaning of the word red, is something like danger, among others, sure. What about the word blue? The word blue too indicates the blue color, and this can be found in the dictionary. So it is called the literal meaning of the word or the dictionary meaning of the word or the primary meaning of the word. But the word bad connotes other meanings which are called connotations or secondary meanings or associated meanings. Something like sad. When we say he is feeling blue, he's feeling blue, it means he's feeling sad, you know? So this is the connotation, among others, of the word blue. What about the word winter? Winter indicates the season, winter season, because we have, four seasons, and winter is one of them. So the literal meaning or the dictionary meaning of the word winter is season. But when we mention the word season, you may associate or imply cold, for example, feeling cold, for example. So cold, this is one connotation of the word winter. The word dog, it indicates an animal, you know, which is the canine, for example. But the connotation of this word may be something like bad, okay? When we say this is a dog, we mean this is a bad man, for example, or among others, because we may connote the meaning of loyalty. Just to say he's a dog, he is loyal as a dog, for example. So we have different connotations of all of these words. Okay, but here we are just giving one example for simplicity. The word cat, this is the large animal, as you know, but if we say this is unpleasant woman, you know, so this is unpleasant woman, so we may use the word cow to imply or to associate this meaning. Cow in the meaning of unpleasant woman. Verbs such as aroma or nouns such as aroma, which means smell, and the same meaning can be used using the word stench. So aroma and stench have the same denotation, which is smell. But aroma indicates or associates pleasing smell, while stench associates less appealing smell. So here, take care, two words have the same denotations but have different connotations. So this is the difference between denotation, which indicates the dictionary meaning or the literal meaning, sorry, of the word, and the connotation, which indicates the associated or implied meaning, and this vary according to the culture and among others. So now, in case of the critical reading, the reader finally arrives at the stage where he or she can pass a judgment and make evaluation. That springs from personal convictions to criticism and assessment of what has been read. Then, also critical thinking is a reflective mental process. Why? Because first you read, then you process, then you criticize and evaluate. And also you interact with the text in order to get at the connotations that express meanings inherent in its deep structure. So the deep structure of the text has its own implied meaning and associated messages, and these messages and these implied meanings could be retrieved through the critical reading or the active reading here. Critical reading, in case of the critical reading, the text is interpreted, not only interpreted, but also analyzed, evaluated, and criticized. Why? What is the purpose of these processes? To build its meanings and give it other connotations to fill its gaps. Based on what? Based on the previous knowledge and the experience of the reader. And this will assist the reproduction of the text. So take care here, this very important slide here. The text in case of the critical reading is interpreted, analyzed, evaluated, and criticized. Why? What is the purpose? To build its meanings and give it other connotations to fill its gaps. On what base? Based on the previous knowledge or the previous background and experience of the reader. And this will help the reader himself or herself to be able to reproduce the text, to reproduce the text, to be able to produce the text again in other format and other version. Then, reading is also a problem solving process. Why? Because it requires the reader to enter into a silent dialogue with the author. When you are going to read a text or an article or a book, for example, yes, you enter into a silent dialogue between yourself and the author, and to participate in the process of interpreting and constructing meaning. You know, the author himself or herself is building and constructing the text itself. I mean, the phrases and the words and the structure of the text. But the reader, by using the critical thinking is interpreting and constructing the meanings behind these texts and phrases. During critical reading, you have to be able to distinguish between the explicit message, the message which is clear enough, and the implicit or implied message. So any piece of writing or any piece of text usually has two messages. The first one is more and more clear, and this is called the explicit message, and the other one is hidden behind or between the lines of the text, and this is called implicit or unclear message here. Then, when we are going to read critically, we are practicing two major skills. The first one is recognition, and the second one is comprehension. Recognition simply means when you just have the first glance on the text, on the phrases, the words, the structure, etc., you are trying to recognize the letters, the alphabet, the symbols, for example, just to recognize the word is in your mind, and this is called recognition. After that, after recognition or recognizing these words and structure, you're gonna to comprehend, try to understand what is the meaning, what's behind this structure or these words. So we have here two major skills. The first is recognition, just to recognize the words, what are they, how are they spelled, how are they pronounced, for example. Then to move to the second major skill, which is comprehension, to try to understand the meaning of these words, whether these meanings are literal meaning, the denotation of these words, or connotation, these are the implied meaning of the words or phrases. Let's move here to the skills of comprehension. So we have different comprehension skills. These start from the literal comprehension, then deductive comprehension, evaluative comprehension, appreciative comprehension, and criticizing comprehension. And as you know, the high level of thinking, the level of thinking is moving upwards like that, from literal to criticizing in this direction. So let's have a simple idea concerning each of them. What's meant by the literal comprehension? In case of the literal comprehension, the reader can recognize the literal meaning of the words, and these are the denotations of the words or the dictionary meanings of the words, can also recognize the main and secondary ideas of the text or the article, the sequence of ideas and results, and the characters contained on the text. All of these are concerning the literal comprehension of an article or a given text. In case of the deductive comprehension, the reader here can mix the data in the text and his or her personal experience. So in this, because he's gonna to make some deductive thinking, just to draw results, for example, he has to mix the data or the information in the text or in the article together with his personal background, personal culture, personal experience. And they can therefore present conclusions and draw results. So, because he is able here to present conclusions and draw results, it is called deductive comprehension. And as you know, this is completely different from the previous one, which was the literal comprehension. The third type of comprehension is evaluative comprehension. In this case, the reader must be able to make judgment, must be able to take decisions and make comparisons. Comparisons at the level of the article or the text, decisions according to the information and data given in the text, etc. In case of the evaluative comprehension, the reader is not only able to make judgments and make decisions and comparisons, but he will also be able to provide evidence to validate or refute some ideas. So this is evaluative. In this case, he will be able to validate or refute some ideas. I mean, just to judge whether they are true, this is to validate, or they are false. And he can prove and provide evidence just to say that whether they are true or whether they are false. The appreciative comprehension is the fourth level of comprehension. And this is, in fact, specific to those who possess artistic and literary talents, where their artistic faculties or abilities usually enable them to do what? To appreciate the literary texts, to understand the artistic aesthetics, to recognize the artistic strengths and the artistic weaknesses. Take care here and notice that the appreciative comprehension is closely related to those who are talented, those who have the strength of artistic appreciation of works, whether they are a piece of art, text literally text such as prose, poetry, etc. So they can appreciate these texts and can decide on the value of the artistic aesthetics and the artistic strengths or weaknesses of this work. The last one is the critical comprehension, and this is most complex reading skill. Why? Because this is the overall goal or the summation or all of these critical reading in this case. So this requires not only the identification of the ideas in the text, but also to be able to discuss and evaluate these ideas together with the author's beliefs and the conventions. In this case, you can explicitly criticize the work, not only the work, you can also criticize the author's beliefs and convictions. So this is the most advanced uh, skill of comprehension here, which is the critical comprehension. So these were the 5 comprehension skills involved in the critical reading. Let's move now. What are the stages of critical reading? Suppose you're gonna to read the text, to read a book, or to read an article, whether this article was whether this article is a scientific one or literary one, etc. So there are 3 stages of critical reading. First of all, you usually question and raise doubts concerning the text. Then you process the information inside your mind, and finally you are gonna to examine your hypothesis according to the data and information given or included in the text. So we have 3 stages: questioning and raising doubts, processing information, and examination of hypotheses and assumptions. In these stages, the first one is questioning and raising doubts. which leads to putting forward assumptions, guesses, predictions, and the prospects of the receiver. Okay? Then you move to the processing. Processing the information followed by comparing it with the content of the text. Then last, you go to the examination process, which means the examination of one's hypothesis and the predictions. And this process is based on textual evidence and thus leads to the evaluation of the text. And this stage will be dealt with when we talk about the critical review or critical essay. So, in general, what are the critical reading skills? We have several critical reading skills. First of them is to be able to identify the main ideas and sub-ideas of the text or the article. Number two, to be able to recognize the similarities and differences in the phrases, in the structure, in the ideas, whether they are primary ideas or secondary ideas. Number three, to be able to recognize the subtle interpretations and the hidden meanings in the text, to be able to recognize these subtle or unclear or hidden or implied meanings or interpretations behind the lines of the text. Number four, to be able to distinguish between fact and opinion when something is provided in the text. Is this a fact or is it just an opinion of the writer? Number five, to be able to distinguish between cause and effect. What leads to what? What is this a cause, a reason, or is it an effect or result? Next, number six, to be able to distinguish redundancies and excessive meanings. Redundancies are things which you can remove without affecting or distorting the overall meaning of the text, for example. Okay? Number seven, to be able to compare between information, ideas, and the different points of view, in the text. Number eight, to be able to evaluate and criticize ideas showing its strengths and weaknesses. Number nine, to be able to assess the writer's argument and support or refute it. This is very important to assess the argument. What is the argument? And are you able to assess this argument or not? To assess it in terms of what? Of supporting it or refuting it on a regular basis using evidences. Number 10, to be able to assess the writer himself and pass a judgment about his or her intellectual and scientific orientation from the text. So, in case of the critical reading, you not only assess and evaluate the text or the work itself, but also to assess and evaluate the writer himself or herself. We have also these skills, number 11, to be able to judge the logical sequences of ideas and events, and to be able, in 12, to deduce the writer's objectives and detect his or her biases. And this is very important. What is the main or the major objective of the writer when he or she is writing this text? And are there any kind of biases or prejudices here? Number 13, to discover fallacies and inaccuracies and misinformation. Because a lot of fallacies or inaccuracies or misinformation may be provided in a given work, on a given text. And this may be implied or even, explicit or even implicit. So you have to be able using your critical reading skills to discover these fallacies or these inaccuracies. Number 14, to be able to predict conclusions from the premises presented in the text. How to draw conclusions and make decisions here. These are the critical thinking, the critical reading skills in a mind map like this. So the question is, how can I develop my critical reading skills? So you have to follow these 6 steps according to this author. First of all, you have to use the self-questioning strategy to ask a lot of things, to ask yourselves a lot of things and a lot of questions concerning the work or the text or the article. Number 2, to try to draw a mind map for the text or for the work, just to illustrate the major ideas, the secondary ideas, etc. And this is called the semantic mapping strategy, just to draw mind maps for the work. Number 3, to get into brainstorming process, and this is called brainstorming strategies, to ask a lot of questions and to try to propose a lot of ideas, etc. And in this, you can use the generative model in which you generate and produce a lot of assumptions, a lot of ideas or points of view. Number 5 is called the visualization strategy. Visualization strategy to make the ideas or whether they are secondary or main ideas in the text be visualized inside your brain like this. Number 6, the deep thinking. And the deep thinking is done by the accurate observation, to observe every single detail included in the text or the article, whether it is clear or unclear. Then you are thinking deeply. These are the 6 critical reading skills adopted or proposed by these authors. And these are here summarized in this mind map like this. What about the importance of critical reading? The question is critical reading important? Yes, the answer is absolutely yes. But why? This is because critical reading develops accurate understanding of things, of texts or articles or books. It develops constructive engagement with the read text. It develops creativity, you know. It develops self-confidence. It helps reach the highest level of comprehension, which is criticism, as I stated before. It utilizes high-level mental processes. It enhances independent thinking. When we read an article, a book, for example, critically, we can make something called critical analysis. It means to analyze the text critically and to be able to write down an essay or a review, which is called critical review or critical essay. So, here, what is critical analysis? Critical analysis means scrutinizing or examining a literary or scientific text based on a set of criteria to define its value. So the purpose of critical analysis to define the value of a literary or scientific text. But based on what? Based on a set of criteria using the processes of scrutinizing, discrimination, and examining these texts. So simply again, critical analysis means scrutinizing or examining a literary or scientific text based on a set of criteria. What is the purpose? To define the value of this literary or scientific text. And the critical analysis evaluates both the form of the text and the content of the text. I mean, the structure of the text and the content itself, as well as the effectiveness of achieving the intended aim. So, there is a very important question here to ask. Has the writer been able to achieve the intended goal or not? Had the scientific or literary text itself achieved its intended aim or goal or not? So this is very important and very critical question we have to pose when analyzing critically. So we have some questions we have to ask to be able to analyze text critically. The first one is what? The second is how? The third is why? And the fourth is so what? So we have here four questions which are critical analysis questions or questions for critical analysis. What? How? Why? Then so what? Let's go to have a simple explanation. What? It means what is it? We mean the work, the text. What is it? Is it literary? Is it scientific? Is it some kind of prose, poetry, story, novel, etc.? Article in the newspaper or magazine? What is it about? This is what is the topic of this work. Then what is its aim? All of these are here using the question word what. What is it? What is it about? What is its aim? Number two, how? How does this work look? How does it work? How does it compare to other somethings, for example? Then, why? Why is it good or bad? This is what are the justifications for being good or bad work? Making a judgment about its value or significance. Then, so what? This is the conclusion and actions. What about your recommendation concerning these works or this text? So we have here four major questions for critical analysis. What, how, why, and so what. But in this context, we have to distinguish between the descriptive writing and the critical writing. In case of the descriptive writing, we merely reformulate the subject itself. Reformulate the subject. Just to mention the historical evolution of the topic, or the name of the writer, or what is the research about, what are the outcomes. So we are simply describing issues like this. We do not here interfere or interact with the text here. So this is descriptive writing. But in case of the critical writing, an evaluation of the work based on the specific criteria is done here. So we have to evaluate the work, to criticize the work, not only to describe it simply, but this should be done on the basis of a specific criteria. We have to mention what are the strengths or the weaknesses of the work. What is the reader's opinion, and what is the importance of this article or this subject. So all of these are components of the critical writing. Suppose here we are going to do what? To write a critical review or a critical essay just to describe and evaluate a given work or text, whether it is literary or scientific text or work. So what does the critical review or the critical essay, suppose we are now writing a critical review about a book, about a text such as article, scientific article, literary article, an article in the magazine or a newspaper, etc. So we have to include the main ideas or argument in the book or article, and take care here. Don't feel you have to mention everything. Part of being an effective evaluator is being able to extract the most important ideas from a source. So, in case of mentioning the main ideas or the main arguments in the book or in the article, you have to be summarizing and extracting the main ideas or the main arguments, in fact. The second thing to be included in your review, just to mention your own evaluation or assessment of the article or the book. In this case, don't just accept the author's opinions or the author's statements without question. You have to question everything and you have to assess everything independently. You have to ask yourself such questions as, how effective is the author's argument? Is it clearly presented? Is it clearly explained? Is it biased in any way? Okay, etc. So these are the major components you have to include in your critical review or critical article or critical essay. As we stated before, the critical article or the critical essay or the critical review is an essay you write to describe and criticize or evaluate a given work, a given text, a given article, or a given book. So, what about the format or the structure of a critical essay? For example, you're gonna to you are asked to write a critical essay about a book you've read recently, for example, or an article you've read recently. In this case, what about the structure or the format of this essay? The critical essay should have four main parts. The first is the introduction, the second is the summary, the third is the analysis, the fourth is the conclusion. The introduction, what is the function of the introduction? You have to introduce the work stating its title, the author, the publication date, etc., among others of the basic data about the work. Then you have to outline or extract the main ideas of the book or the article and what is the author's thesis. The author's thesis is the main or major topic dealt with by the author. And finally, you have to state your own thesis statement. Your own thesis statement is the topic or the issue you're gonna to communicate with your audience and your argument or point of view about the work. So, in case of the introduction should include the basic data or information about the work, such as the title, the name of the author, the publication date. It should also include the outline of the main ideas of the work, what is the author's thesis, and what is your own thesis statement? What is your own topic? What are you going to do in this critical essay? So, in case of the summary, a short summary of the points you would like to make about the content of the work, its incidents and characters. You can also mention structure and style. Here you summarize your essay in terms of mentioning the content of the work, the incidents, the characters, or even something concerning the structure and the style of the work. The third part or the third component of the critical essay is analysis, and this is the major component of the critical essay, in which you're gonna to critically state what is your position, what is your point of view. You have here to provide evidences from the text and from other sources to support your ideas or your position. You have to support your ideas with the specific examples from the work itself and from other sources. You have to evaluate and assess the form of the work and the structure. You have also to evaluate and assess the content of the work, and you have finally to evaluate whether the author or the work itself has achieved the intended aim or goal effectively. So these are very important components of the analysis part of critical essay. Number 4, you have to provide a conclusion. And in this conclusion, you have to summarize what have you proven, why is the book or the article or the work in general worth reading or not. You have here to conclude, then to include some appropriate tips about what your paper adds to the analysis of the book. What's new in your paper? What's new in your article? I mean, your critical essay or critical article here. What are the added values of your paper here? So we have here to differentiate between two types of articles or two types of reviews: the critical review and the literature review. And there is a big difference between both of them. We tackled in detail the critical reviews, but what's meant by the literature review? A literature review is a type of critical review in which you analyze and evaluate many sources. Take care here. You evaluate and analyze and evaluate many sources, not only single source. In case of the critical review, you usually analyze and evaluate a single source, which is the given or a specific article, the specific text or book, etc. But in case of the literature review, you are analyzing and evaluating many sources, more than these are usually several sources, but they are all on a specific topic, on a specific topic. Okay? Then, what is your purpose here in case of the literature review? In case of the literature review, you are trying to provide the readers with an overview of the research that has been done on your topic. Okay? This is your purpose. And to evaluate the sources you are reviewing, you will probably include less detailed information on each source than you would in a critical review of a single book or article. And instead, you will focus on the most important points relevant to your topic. So take care here In case of the critical review, we tackle only single source. But in case of the literature review, we tackle and deal with many sources on a specific topic. In case of the critical review, we write more and more details concerning this single text. But in case of the literature review, we summarize the points about each source. To know more about the difference between the critical reviews and literature review, you can visit this site in which you can find this comparison. Then, let's here have an activity. This is activity concerning the critical review and the critical reading. There is a translation of an article in your book 6. This article is entitled The Role of Psychology in Facing Terrorism and Extremism. I will attach this article together with this file, but even we can have a glance here for this article. This is activity 3 in your book, Think, Critique. Read the following passage critically and answer the following questions. The role of psychology in facing terrorism and extremism. The article says here, or the author says, the Egyptian society is suffering from the growing phenomenon of terrorism, which has become a major threat to the cohesion of society and clearly undermines all efforts to achieve justice and uphold the principle of citizenship. In order to confront this creeping threat to Egyptian society, several explanations and solutions were offered. So, you have to read it explicitly, and after reading it, answer the questions, then try to write a critical review on the article. Your critical review should include the introduction, the summary, the analysis together with the evaluation, and the conclusion. Try to do it even in 2 pages or even a single page to practice writing critique or some kind of critical review or critical essay. This is very important for you and for your career. So, this is the end of our lecture. And my advice again, before trying to change the world, you've better change yourself before trying to change the world. I wish you the best of luck, my students. Until meeting you next lecture, have a nice time. Assalamu alaikum.